Hello again, it's Christina. In this video I'm going to talk about my tibial plateau surgery and my 5-day stay in the orthopedic ward. In previous videos I talked about my accident and the femur surgery, so if you're curious you can go check them out also. It took me a while to make this video because I had to go over photos and videos and texts in order to refresh my memory, and I got very emotional. Seeing conversations in which I was telling my sister that I wish I had died in the accident was not an easy thing to do. After 3 days in the ICU after my femur surgery, I was moved in the orthopedic ward in a COVID room, and I was supposed to have surgery that same day, but it was postponed for 1 day. The room had 6 beds and only 3 were occupied. Diagonally to me was this old lady that seemed alright mentally, but her hearing was very bad, so there was no chance of me talking to her. In front of me was a lady who kept on mumbling these gloomy prayers or something, so I nicknamed her Doomsday. And right next to me was this lady who probably had dementia. She had no idea where she was, what happened to her. She kept asking for her clothes, she wanted to leave, and she kept screaming. So I was not in good company, but I think this is what motivated me to want to leave earlier, because they initially told me I will be there for 14 days and I ended up staying just 8 days. I had surgery the second day, pretty late if I recall. My fracture was an easy one. It was the type that didn't even require surgery, but because my right femur was broken, the left leg was supposed to bear all my weight, so they wanted to make sure that the fracture is stabilized with the plate. They said it's gonna be a pretty easy surgery and it's gonna last about 45 minutes. I think my morphine dose was still pretty high because the memories of that time are quite blurry. I remember once again suffering from thirst, and I remember feeling like I was suffocating when they put my gas mask on. When I woke up, my leg was very swollen and I had this bandage all around my knee, which was different from my femur surgery because there they just left me with the silicone bandage inside. I also felt like something was cuffing my ankle, and I was wondering if they maybe left a plastic tag around my leg. But later, when I was able to uncover the leg, I saw that it was actually nothing, so I guess it was just a sensation from the nerve block maybe? In the ICU, they were able to provide some ice for me, but apparently in the ward the ice machine was broken. So all the remaining days, my partner and my sister had to bring me some ice packs, the kind you put in a cooler bag, and I think those helped a lot with the swelling and the pain. The third day I felt quite sick. I still had my morphine pump, but they supplemented with morphine pills, which made me very nauseous. I even threw up once or twice. And in this day I made a scene with the nurses. So the lady with dementia wanted to get out of her bed, and I had already seen her fall once before. So I kept ringing the button for the nurses to come and stop her, and I was trying to talk her out into getting out of the bed. I became quite agitated, and when the nurses came, I told them I kind of felt like it was my responsibility for this lady not to fall, and I started crying hysterically, but they told me that it's not my business and if she falls, she falls. Maybe I was a bit out of line, but that's because I'm very sensitive to old people suffering. So I asked them if they can sedate her, and they just snapped at me that they just can sedate people because it bothers me. But it was just wild for me that they would just rather have her walking and break another leg than sedate her. From that moment on, I kind of felt like some of the nurses were giving me the cold shoulder. For example, I remember asking one of them to bring me a sick bowl, and she said a sharp yes, but then she didn't bring me one, so I just had to sit there and breathe deeply and try not to puke on myself. They also didn't help with my hygiene much. they would bring me all I needed, like water and towels, but I couldn't reach half of my body to wipe myself, so I would just wait for them to come and pick up the water basin, and then I would ask for help, but by then the water was already cold. And I know that kind of, I mean, for some people it might seem insignificant, but for people in my position, it only deepens the feeling of helplessness, and well, I just felt just damaged and alone. That night, that lady kept screaming, and I wasn't able to sleep at all. And the next day, the fourth day, I really thought I was going to die. My heart was racing, my pulse was 125 just laying there, my stomach was burning, and I was nauseous. I told the nurses I felt like my heart was going to burst, and one of them came and just pushed some medicine in my IV so aggressively that I actually felt my vein burning, and that just got me really high and put me to sleep immediately. For nausea, they gave me Gaviscon, which wasn't helping very much, and I knew it was from the morphine pills, so I refused to take them and I started using my morphine pump less and less. That day, the physiotherapist came to see me for the first time. He was this really young guy, he had such a good energy about him. He told me he had a hip replacement a year before and that he was already back playing squash, and that gave me a lot of hope. But little did I know that a femur break recovery is way more difficult than a hip replacement recovery. He first tried to bend my knee towards my chest, and that was very painful, and I asked him if he's trying to break my leg again. And then he told me to flex my quad, explaining that I have to push my knee towards the bed, but my muscle was completely unresponsive. He then taught me how to bring my bad leg over the edge of the bed, like using my good leg, and he made me stand up and use this frame on wheels. It was a really tall one, I was putting my elbows on it. He asked me if I wanted to go to the toilet to try to go number two, and I said okay, let's try it, but of course that wasn't going to happen after just laying in bed for 5 days. So then a nurse came and offered me an enema, and I hated the thought of it, but I knew it was necessary. It was a bold thing to do because after you have one, you basically have to rush to the toilet 3 or 4 times on a period of time, and they didn't leave me the frame by the bed, so each time I had to buzz the nurse and should have to go look for the frame around the ward and bring it to me. So yeah, it was difficult, but I managed to keep my dignity and not shit myself. So I was happy, I was pooping, the nurses were happy, everybody who had surgery knows what a big deal this is. And then they told me we have to take the catheter out to avoid the risk of infection. And I didn't want this because it was kind of convenient not to have to rush to the toilet every time I have to pee. But there was no way around it, I had to do it. It wasn't painful, but after that I did have the sensation of peeing very often, and it took me like 15 minutes to get to the toilet and back, so it wasn't very fun. The fourth day they removed my morphine pump because I wasn't using it enough, so they left me only on oxycodone and paracetamol. The lack of morphine, besides the elevated pulse, also came with a steep change in my mood, so I became kind of depressed. I felt like I really fucked up my body and probably the rest of my life. Without the morphine, I was also getting very uncomfortable in my bed. I felt all the stiffness and all the back pain. The adjustable bed helped with that a little bit. I was constantly pushing the buttons. Basically, that was my gymnastics. It was the only way I could bend my knees a little bit. The days were passing very slowly and the nights also because I wasn't sleeping all that much, but at least the lady with dementia was moved 2 beds away from me and she was given diazepam, so, less screaming. That was good. The only joy I had was when physio came to see me. It was the only time when I wasn't feeling like a body left to rot in my bed. This time he came with a regular frame and crutches for me to try. And now that I didn't have all the wires coming out of me, it was easier. The frame was an easy one. With the crutches, I was a little bit nervous, but I did good. I was moving both crutches at the same time, so he taught me how to alternate the movement so I move faster and more naturally. Another visit I got that day was from the anesthesiologist from my femur surgery. He was so young, the poor guy. He told me they were so scared for me during surgery that my state got really bad and that they had their fingers crossed for me. I later googled and found out that anesthesiologists are the ones responsible for blood and fluid transfusion in a surgery, so basically I owed my life to this guy. It's a strange feeling to hear that you almost died and to hear that the almighty doctors on whom you put your full trust into were absolutely freaked out also. By day 5, my femur bandage has started to blister because my incision was oozing, and that really freaked me out, and I kept asking the nurses if maybe that was pus and it was an infection, and they reassured me. They said, "We would know if it's an infection. Why do you think we keep on taking blood every day?" Blood drawing was a nightmare for me because by that time my veins were almost invisible and I didn't understand why they cannot just use the IV line I already had. I remember the last days they tried to take blood from my hands and that was really painful. They would only get like 2 drops of blood out of me. I was already getting up quite often, especially after they gave me a strap to maneuver my leg in and out of bed. The nurses were quite surprised to see me around the room and they didn't understand what I was doing, but I just wanted to walk. I remember one of the old ladies complaining that I had my butt out because I was too unstable to tie my gown around my back. I was like, I smell your shits every day and you are offended because you're seeing my butt? Anyway, PT came again. He was supposed to teach me how to go up and down the stairs. He made sure that the hallway and the stairway are free because I had COVID, and he took me out of the room, and it was such a great feeling because I felt like the outer world didn't exist anymore. I was just trapped in that room, and I did the stairs. I did it. I succeeded. And yeah, he said from his point of view, I'm ready to be discharged. The 6th and final day came, so it was the 9th day, so not 8 actually, it was the 9th day in total. They finally removed the last intravenous line I had. They removed the staples from my head, they did some last blood tests, which came out fine, and they also did an electrocardiogram because my heart was still racing. I had to wait for a long time for someone to read that ECG, and then the nurse that was supposed to discharge me wasn't to be found, and finally at around 7 or 8 p.m. they let me go. I'll talk about getting home and the early stages of my recovery in the next video. If you have questions or want to reach out, please do. Subscribe to see my next videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!